Hi, and welcome to Lesson 12 in Excel for Busy Salespeople. This lesson kind of has two labels. You can see the lesson I've called it here is conditional formatting to find a list of obsolete parts and a list of other parts, or in the lesson plan, it's just called highlighting data. So, something that's very common in our industry, we get a report and the report says, hey, we have these list of parts that we've obsoleted in the last 30 days, or so you should reach out to all of your customers that have ever bought this part and let them know that they need to place a last time buy, or find all the customers who are buying these parts and let them know that the lead times are extending, so they need to modify the lead time entry in their data system, whatever. So here I've got my list of customers, and I'm going to head and go to expand this. And so now you can see here's all the principals and here's all the parts. So this is quite the list of data. And the question is, how can I find one value or each occurrence of this value in the data set? Now, I could certainly go through and say, oh, K16 A1, how would I find that? Well, I can go here and just say K16 A, help if I could type, 16 A1. And so now that's fine if I'm looking up one value. But then if I'm looking up 3 or 5 or 10 or 50 values, it becomes impractical pretty quick. So how can I create this where I can find it very quickly among a large set of data? So I'm going to clear that filter. So this is another example of where you can use conditional formatting. So let me show you what the result is first. So I've got three values here. How do I make them show up in this list of data? And voila, just like a magic trick, each occurrence of each one of those values is highlighted in this data set. So how did this happen? What sorcery is this? So if you go to the formulas, we've used the conditional formatting to simply create a value. And again, this is on the formulas tab, just so you'll have it for reference. I said count if, and again, we've used df to df. So essentially anything in that column, and then it references C5, which is where the first application is greater than or equal to 1. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table. So it looks like it's only applied to C5, but if I go to manage rules, it applies from C5 to C5000. But if you look at the rule, you can see it just starts at C5, and of course there's nothing that ties it down. So as it goes to C6, it'll apply to C6, it'll apply to C7, all the way down to C5000. So it's really a straightforward rule that is super powerful. And so I can very quickly see which customers have bought these parts. Now, one thing that you can't do is make it where a lot of times you would say, oh, now I'll just sort that by color, but conditional formatting doesn't allow you to do that. So this is one way to give you a really quick glance and show you that the values are there. If you really have to create a complete report that said, I want a physical list of just these customers that have purchased the parts that are on this list, then you have to take one additional step. Um, So I'm going to create that now. Let me go back to the top of the list. So if I go over here to my data tab, you may remember from earlier lessons, I have some extra columns out here where I've gone through and set up a territory, a rate value, the zip code value, and then if the ones from the alias table list, what the alias is in cases where they're reported by multiple locations. So I've got another column here, column O, that I've called search list. And all this is going to do is give me the opportunity to use this same formula. So I've got my formula that says count if df, it applies to C5 is greater than or equal to 1. So obviously I'm going to have to change that slightly. So what I will do is I'm going to say count if. First off, I have to tell it to go to the pivot tab. So I've gone from the pivot tab, and then I'm using df through df, so it's the same range, but it's just on the pivot tab. Here it needs to apply to the part number, which in this case is H2, is greater than or equal to 1. So I'll select that formula, and of course this part number is not one of those that is greater than or equal to 1. So again, I can pull this down, or I can copy, Control Shift down arrow, paste it back. So you can see the ones that do match. Remember, there was only a couple of values. And here's that K16A1, and it shows as true. I can do the same search, just show the values that are true. So obviously we got our function right. And then if I go back to my pivot table, so I'm going to refresh my data source because I've changed it. And now I can go in and add from my field list. I've already got a value called search list because it was in my original table listing. And I will put it up here on my report filter. Of course, it's telling me it's going to move stuff around. So in this case, I'll cancel that just for giggles and put it on my, let's see here, column. Well, I can just set that equal to true. And there's the only values, there's the only customers that will be affected by whatever this list is. So two ways. One is just a quick highlight. If you do have to create a hard and fast report, or you want to give reports to your salespeople and say, go get them, then you need to add that flag over here into your original data set. As your tables get really big, this could ultimately impact the speed at which you recalculate. So just be aware of that. If you really get large data sets, you may want to turn that function off unless you really need it for that particular calculation. Anyway, that wraps it up for highlighting data. We've got a couple more lessons on formatting for pivot tables that hopefully will make it useful. So come back and join us for lesson 13, repeating rows. Thanks. See you soon.